Okay, everyone, welcome to our branch and districts National Education Union's Zoom conference. It's the first one we've done of these, and firstly I want to say thank you very much for joining us. Before I do any more, I just need to do some housekeeping, just so that you all know where we're at. So firstly, just to let you know, this is going to be recorded so that those who cannot get on are able to look at it later, or that we can use it to come back with some questions. If you don't wish to be on the recording, you have two options. One is to take yourself off the video so we can only hear your voice, or you can only hear us but we can't see you, or the other one is just to come out completely, because we will be definitely recording this. So if you don't wish to be recorded, then you can either turn your video off so we can't see you, or you can just come out of the recording and then get a look at it later on. Before we start, in the chat box at the top is the first posting in there was around the best statements of behaviour and how we conduct ourselves during these meetings. So we are on a very strict deadline and timeline. If I stop you talking, then you know, I'll let you finish off your sentence, but we will have to stop and let the question be answered or move on to the next person so that we get as many people as possible to contribute into this. So please have a look at the NEU statement. If you are posting questions, I'm not going to take questions that are spoken. What I want you to do is to put your question in the chat and to start with a capital Q so that the technical team can pick out your questions and post them to me on a separate app that we're using, and I'll be able to ask those questions. So to post a question, put a capital Q, and then please put this question is for, so a capital Q, for, and then whoever it is, and it might be one of our speakers that's speaking, or it might be for Kevin and Mary, and write your question, then say your name and where you're from so that we can make sure that we're recording that and we can know who we're addressing our answers to when it comes back. Some of you have submitted questions. If your question isn't answered, or if we defer you, some of the questions that have come in are casework questions. This is not a casework conference call. This is a casework call and briefing to update you on what we're doing so far and to hear from some of the really good organising strategies that have been going on. We are supported by a technical team who are Mike, Henry, Richard, Jono, Craig, and they will be helping us to feed the questions through. And if I say Mike unlock, that means he's going to unlock the microphone of the person that we've got here. So just to repeat, to post your questions, you post in the chat. We will then have those. I will not open a question and answer session until we've heard from each of our speakers today. That will be Kevin and Mary and some branch and district secretaries from around the country so that we can hear what's going on. So that's the technical bit, that's the housekeeping. I want to say thank you very much for all you're doing. The last time many of us met was in a very different circumstance, but actually not very long ago. And funnily enough, only one person asked a question around COVID at that time, and here we are now in very different circumstances. I'm not going to take too much of probably what Kevin and Mary are going to say, but I am going to say that our union is smashing it out there. There are some people still with some issues, but we are helping to support those in a casework, advice line, regional office point of view. But we're also organising. We've had 5,000 new members in the last 2 weeks. We have nearly 200 people on this call right now, and we have gained nearly 200 reps across the country in schools because of this and the work the NEU is doing. We are the only union out there. And so I wanted to start by saying what a good job that everyone has done. And Kevin and Mary are the front of this, but we absolutely know that without the people in the HQ and around in the regions, and without you as lay officers, and I'm a branch and district secretary myself, that they wouldn't have all the information and all the questions and be able to be pushing government and the various agencies as they are. So I'm going to start with Kevin or Mary. Which one of you is going to go first?
Mary.
I'm going to start with Mary. Welcome, Mary.
So thank you, Amanda, and thanks to everyone for taking part, and good afternoon. We think that the National Education Union has done really well. It's an ill world which grows no good, and the COVID crisis is terrible. It's a terrible thing for our society, for our country, and for the world. But we do think the National Education Union will come out of this stronger, with more reps, with more members, and with more organising capacity. And that's really amazing. So just to give some examples of that, our first video that Kevin and I did, where we called on Boris Johnson to reveal the modelling behind the assumptions about the spread of the virus, where we said that, well, we were the first to make the call that it was not only staff who were in vulnerable groups, but those who lived with people in vulnerable groups should not be in school, and that's the reality because we made that call. That video was seen by 250,000 people. In fact, Kevin and I were in the top 10 of the YouTube videos that week.
Yeah.
So that's something quite amazing, really. And we do think that that advice has been really important. You are in a vulnerable group or living with somebody in a vulnerable group, you should not be in school. That's been really important in keeping our members safe. We've also regularly updated the FAQs on the website. If you haven't been to the website recently, do go to it. It is absolutely brilliant. Really clear now where you get information if you're in the independent sector or you're a rep or you're a branch officer or you're a member. It's really, really clear, and the frequently asked questions are really clear. We're getting hundreds of thousands of people going to the website, many of them for the first time. So that's really important. We've also had 3 member town hall meetings where we've had nearly over 3,000 members on those town hall meetings, asking questions and listening to answers. And those have been a really important way of keeping in touch with members. And on those member town halls, we asked members to become COVID-19 reps. If you haven't got a rep in your school or college, will you become a COVID-19 reps? And hundreds have actually taken up that call and doing that. We led the way, and we produced the first draft of the joint advice with the NEHT and ASCL. So we wrote that, and that's why that advice is so good. And that's why that advice is so powerful, because the NEHT and ASCL really had to sort of come on board with what we were saying and made very few changes to it. In fact, in some places, they strengthened the first draft. We think that advice is really important because it tells recalcitrant heads, school leaders who aren't doing the right thing, and they may be in ASCL or the NEHT, look, your union is telling you to do this, and so please get on with it. Now, we're very aware that some schools are treating their staff really well. They're treating their teachers and support staff like informed professionals. You know, in other places, there's a load of nonsense going on, dangerous, repressive nonsense. Teachers are told they've got to register for an online staff meeting at 8:15 in the morning. Schools where it's just saying to their teaching assistants, you've got to come in every day, even, you know, no matter how many pupils are in the school. And there's also a huge amount of nonsense going on about pupils' work, about grading pupils' work, about online distance learning, and around setting more work for the GCSEs, AS and A-levels. So we've published guidance. We've said that no new work should be set. It should only be the work that students have already done, because they have such differential access to learning and to IT if they're not in school. And we're pleased to say that Ofqual has backed that call. So it's the NEU's advice about teaching and learning, which is really, really important. And we've just released great advice about special schools. So we're doing great things. And now I'm going to hand over to Kevin.
Thanks, Mary, and hiya, everybody. Thanks for being on the call. Just a couple of words about supply teachers and agency TAs. I know that's coming up a very great deal for you. Our colleagues Andrew Morris, Jane Phillips did a telephone town hall on Monday of this week. More than 1,000 people on that call. Really good feedback from supply colleagues about that. Our starting point is our advice with ASCL and NEHT that schools that have people on long-term supply should continue to employ them. And we want to go after heads who aren't doing that. We've got the 2 leading head organisations, besides ourselves that is, to say that we want to go after people who aren't doing that. We've also now got this advice from the government that people who are PAYE can get money, can through the furlough scheme. We haven't yet seen the legislation, and a lot of our advice and campaign tactics are going to depend on what the precise detail of the legislation is. We're meeting with the agency body that represents supply agencies, and we'll get some guidance out with them, but there are lots of cowboy agencies and we'll want to expose them. Like Mary said, we are an organising union, and it matters now more than anything where we've got good stuff in schools. It's because we've got reps supported by branch officers who are encouraging that to happen. And we have recruited more than 250 new COVID-19 reps, we're calling them. So we're encouraging people to come forward. calling them COVID-19. That implies that they haven't got to do it after this crisis. Obviously, we'll want to keep them after the crisis, but we want to reduce the barrier to becoming a rep. So 250, we ring them the day they register on the site and talk through being a rep with them. And our regional staff and our organisers who aren't now able to do casework, or it's not happening, we are ringing all of our reps. And we have started this week, we've got more than 10,000 reps. We are ringing all of them. We started this week, we've rung more than 400. I'd spoken to more than 400 in the last couple of days. Early indications are that those phone calls are really appreciated by the reps. And we think we can really build our strength going forward from that. And we're organising at the base, but we're trying to use the pressure that you're creating at the base to get change elsewhere. So we are now in the meetings with the Secretary of State. We weren't at the beginning. He was just meeting with Askell and NHT. We threatened to expose that to our members, say they weren't cooperating with us, and they've now let us into the meetings, and we're making some ground. We've got some voice in those meetings. We're also talking with Ofqual and other people, and your work on the ground is helping us with that. Now, it's fair to say it's non-stop for many staff in the union, and I know for you as well, and there are new issues all the time. So one emerging issue we're looking at the moment is staff in the independent sector, some of them being told that their colleges, their schools are going to make them redundant. We're working to persuade them that they have to do the furlough scheme rather than that, but that's ongoing work. We're also realising, and you'll be realising this, there are whole sections of members who have particular questions where we really want to help them, and we really want you to help them. So for example, those young people on School Direct, finishing their School Direct this year, haven't got a job yet for September. They don't know how they're going to get the job. So we're getting advice out about how video phone calls are going to do, video interviews are going to work. But we just think that there's a huge recruitment opportunity in this as well. So we're going to do a survey of those people. We're going to go back to them and encourage them to come forward. But really asking reps at the workplace level to talk with those School Direct people to make it clear that they can join our union, and we are relaxing rules slightly. Where if they want to join now, even if what they want to join about is the corona crisis, we're letting them in. We're not saying that that crisis was on before you joined. So we really want to push on recruitment at the moment as well. And I just want to say, we want to say thank you to you and to our workplace reps. We think the union has done a blinding job, and it's your work that's done that. But Mary and I also really need to say thank you to our staff, because actually, for example, and it is just an example, the IT staff worked, when we saw that closure was coming, worked like Trojans for weeks, for a good number of weeks, a fortnight, to get us into a place where we are operating every union system in an online environment, where we paid 300 sustentation claims today from an online environment, where we took the subscriptions income last week. So we're operating on all guns. So we want to thank our staff as well as thanking you for the work you're doing.
Thank you, Kevin, and thank you, Mary, for that introduction. So like I said at the outset, this is around organising and redefining our roles. I am a branch secretary in Portsmouth, and what I've been doing is a 7 o'clock phone call each night with my Deputy Director of Education to check through what the mail is going to go out to all leaders, and then forwarding that on to my reps as well in schools. It's been absolutely evident and highlighting the key people that aren't following advice. So it's been a really good way of beginning to work and look together. But there are other people around the country, and I'm going to move over to Phil Clark from East Sussex, and he's going to give us 2 minutes, Phil, on building a rep community during COVID. Oh no, sorry, 5 to 10 minutes, Phil. Thank you.
Yeah, I thought you were just cutting me very short. I will keep it short, but 2 minutes might be a struggle. Yeah, I know what I'm going to talk about. Loads of people will have done similar, probably in many ways better than what we've been doing in East Sussex, but I just wanted to, or I was asked to share with you the sort of things we do. It's quite a rural area. We do have real strong patches of reps, but we've also got a lot of small rural schools as well. It's a Tory authority, so we've had very, very little joy in properly engaging with the LEA, which seems frankly asleep at the wheel. So what we've really focused on is turning towards the members and towards the reps to build organisation. It's a really tough situation, and we shouldn't, of course, make light of that. But I think it came clear quite early on this was a really big organising opportunity. I track the open rates in my emails really, really closely, and the first one I sent out about the COVID crisis, we get a good open rate anyway, but it was triple the normal open rate, and it kind of just said something. Hang on a minute, members are really engaging. So what we've done is try to take a really, really systematic approach to engaging with the reps we've got and engaging as many members in as many schools as possible to basically take on the role of reps. So one thing we've done, which I know a lot of people have, is set up a WhatsApp group. All reps were added to that. And then we, in the emails that we knew were getting a very high open rate, we said we're going to have this local WhatsApp group. What I didn't do was just send out a link so anyone could join. What I said was, please email me with your number and the school you're in, and I can add you. And that way I kept, firstly, it meant people had to be quite proactive and think, yeah, I really want to take part. But it meant I could keep track, very, very a detailed track of who was in the WhatsApp group from what schools. And I could sort of cross off which schools we clearly were having communication with and which we weren't. That was really successful, and I mean, within a day or so, we had double the number of schools represented in the WhatsApp that have had reps prior to the crisis, which was a really good starting point. We also, my joint branch secretary, Dave Brinson, put together a very, very comprehensive survey to get very detailed information on all the rotas operating in all the schools. Actually, we've ended up probably with more data than we can handle, and it perhaps could have been scaled back a bit. We've got a huge amount of data now about exactly what's going on in schools. When we sent that out, again, we kept a very, very careful track of which schools were coming back with data. Any school without a rep had a slightly different survey, which said, we've got a WhatsApp group. Do you want to take part? If so, enter your number. So we could, again, increase the number of schools without reps with someone we're communicating directly with. And we then sort of followed that up. So any school we hadn't got a response from got a direct email saying, come on guys, no one from your school has told us what your rota is. That shifted another load. And then any outstanding schools, we have been organising, phoning the members in those schools and saying, look, I've got the survey in front of me here. Can you help me fill it out? Would you be willing to be, we weren't calling them COVID reps at that point, but effectively, would you be willing to be a COVID rep? So we've had detailed information and communication with members in hundreds of schools, the majority of which we didn't have reps in. We're talking about lots and lots of small schools in my area. And we've very systematically gone through making sure we've had communication and adding people to the WhatsApp to make them feel part of something. At all points, we've always prioritised, always going through biggest membership schools first, and then working down. So we're getting as many as many members, having someone in their school who's communicating with us as possible. The WhatsApp itself has been really, really good. We've kept it very tight. It's not just a free for all, but it's to the point now where people are answering each other's questions, which is exactly what we want. It doesn't have to be, me or other officers pitching in. Yesterday, one of our reps, who's quite new, is clearly been self-isolating and hadn't had human contact for quite a while, had a bit of a meltdown. You couldn't have wanted a sort of more supportive thing. There was message after message saying, don't worry, we're all trying to work this out as we go along. Really incredible outpouring of support. So that's been incredibly useful, and now we're using it to discuss things like the new GCSE advice. We've run Zoom calls for our 2 districts within within the, inviting people who are in the WhatsApp group, and that's been slightly less useful than I'd hoped it would be. I think the WhatsApp's been far more useful, but what we are in a position to do, I think, now is make a big leap forward in the number of reps we've got coming out. There is going to be this issue around how you translate what are effectively COVID reps, we've now begun to call COVID reps, into permanent school reps. The line I'm taking at the moment is, compared to the level of negotiating and work you're doing with management over rotas, protecting people in vulnerable groups, directed time is going to be a doddle. This is really as precious as it's ever going to get. So, you should feel confident then you can go on to become a school rep. And I think the next stage, I keep thinking things are going to calm down, and then it never does. It just, stuff continues to pour in. But I'm hopeful over the next 2 weeks with the Easter holidays, it will calm down a bit. What I then want to do is try and not double up on, but kind of back up what the National Union's doing in terms of phoning everyone, and get our officers to have conversations with as many of the new COVID reps as possible. Always with the aim of getting them, once the crisis has passed, to become full school reps. I think probably that's kind of my time up. I hope that was useful.
Great.
Like I say, I know people are already doing it. Thank you.
And they are, firstly, Kelly from Wokingham has said, just trying to find you one. So firstly, Jonathan Jacobs in Enfield Branch said, can you please share the questions you used in your survey? So you're able to email those round to branch and district secretaries, or email them to me, and I'll make sure that we get them out to people. Is that okay? And then a second question for you, Phil, was Kelly from Wokingham. I have sent an email to school reps inviting them to a WhatsApp group that have had no uptake. Do you have any suggestions of how to get them more involved? Phil, can you unlock Phil mic, please?
The survey, we've got a dummy version, so I can share that in the chat in a minute when I'm finished, and I'm quite happy to email it shared. I would suggest with the survey, you'll see it's really detailed. It might be better to scale that back a bit. We probably ended up with more data than we perhaps needed, and we've had to enlist the help of GMB and Unison locally to comb through it and pick out things, because we ended up with so much information. Getting people on the WhatsApp, I must admit, we didn't have that problem necessarily. We have had a lot of people coming forward. I think it's important to get across to people, we can't support them unless we know what's going on, and it's important that they stand up for themselves as professionals, and we're able to support them doing that. If you're really having trouble, I think it's probably worth, I know the union's nationally calling the reps, but just giving them a call and saying, it'd be really useful to be added to this. You can stick it on mute and just dip in and out. But I suspect if you speak to them face to face, you don't speak to people face to face, and no one speaks to people face to face now. If you speak to them on the phone, then I suspect they're unlikely to say they don't want to be part of a group with other reps discussing things.
Okay, thanks. Going to keep your mic open, Phil, because we've got two last questions for you. One is from Robin in Lambeth, and it says, you mentioned keeping it tight. Do you have any ground rules for your WhatsApp group? And if so, what are they? And the other one is from Emma Davis from Barking and Dagenham. What advice would you give to associations who have yet to organise WhatsApp groups and Zoom calls? What support could the union give nationally to ensure that all our associations are organised in this way to make sure it's even across the country?
In terms of ground rules, people have been really well behaved. The only thing we've had to sort of ask people to stop doing is posting, I don't want to say horror stories, because I think the crisis is very serious and people do need to know it, but posting lots of statistics about how, how dangerous the virus is. You know, we've said very clearly, this is for what's going on in your schools, advice about how to deal with that. Anything else, you know, can you keep it on other channels you've got? And people have stuck to that really well. We've had very, very few problems at all. And very, very few people have left the group, and they've come in, and we're talking a group of, you know, well over 100 people. I think we've had like 3 kicked out. Sorry, the other one was, can you remind me of the question, Amanda?
People that haven't set up WhatsApp groups and haven't used Zoom, did you get national support on how can we think about getting national support for doing this?
No, just set it up and add it, but as long as they're happy with it, then stick in your regional officer and anyone else from the regional office who's happy to go in, because of course it shouldn't be for like the branch secretary to have to answer every question, and what you want is the reps answering each other, but it's helpful to have you know, the experience of regional officers in there as well. So do that, but I'd just go ahead and do it. It's been very, very positive for us.
Brilliant, thank you, and thanks Phil for that great insight as to what's happening on the ground where you are. We've got 3 people next, and I'm going to give them literally 2 to 3 minutes each to give us an update on what's going on where they are, and it's around negotiations with the local authority, supply pools, and making demands to help coordinate. So I've got Ros Morton in Sefton, I've got Chris Denson in Coventry, and Paul Shallard in Brighton and Hove. If you can unlock all 3 of their mics. I'll come to Ros first.
Hi everyone.
Hi Ros.
So I'm Ros from Sefton. Initially, our local authority seemed to think that there was any reason why they should be talking to us, which was quite an interesting stance for them to take. We really had to put the pressure on to get them to set up a kind of STJNC meetings. So after nagging them for quite a while and asking our regional office to put the pressure on as well, they did agree eventually to set that up. And in some ways that slight delay was quite useful, because we'd been able, like Phil, to set up our WhatsApp with our reps, etc. So we'd already harvested quite a lot of information from members about what the issues were in the first few days of lockdown. So essentially we then set the agenda for things that we wanted the authority to take a little bit more of a lead on. One of the huge issues was special schools in our area, where the advice from the authority had been non-existent really, and we were supporting members in those special schools where they'd been told that 100% of their students were still coming in because they all had needs. And so we were working with the reps. They've got 2 reps in that school now, which is great. Getting the information from them, taking it to the authority, and then taking it back to the head teacher at that school. And so because we were taking the approach of getting the info first from the members, it's meant that we've kind of set the agenda for the authority in terms of the advice that we want them to be putting out to the teachers across the authority. So we've had a big win on special schools. Within a couple of days, they've been moved onto a proper rota. The numbers of students who were going into school was much reduced. And we were able to kind of build on those wins in the WhatsApp group as well. So every time we reported back that we'd got another head to agree to some kind of a change, and we'd got the authority to agree to be more proactive in putting advice out there, we were getting then more feedback from the members who were saying, right, okay, so the next thing we need to pick up is the actual routines in terms of health and safety in the schools. So once we've got rotas established, how do we make sure that we've got proper protocols in place to keep everybody as safe as possible when they're going to school? So each morning we've had a check-in on the WhatsApp with everybody who's there to ask them how many staff they've got in, to how many pupils, what kind of arrangements are in place to make sure that everything's being cleaned properly and all that sort of stuff. And so we're getting that kind of immediate information back to us, which we then take to the authority, and we're telling the authority, this is somewhere where you need to step in, you need to do more, you need to give clearer advice to this head teacher, or you need to help these particular schools out a little bit more because they don't seem to be able to cope with whatever's going on there at the moment. So it's that kind of almost like a circular communication chain that we've managed to set up. All of that is informed by the members, and that's giving us the clarity we need of what are the issues that we must follow up on. And I think as a result of us being able to feed back quite quickly through the WhatsApp and then through emails that are going out not necessarily every day but quite regularly from us, we know that our members are getting the sense of we're making these wins all the time. Some of them are pretty small, but they're obviously making a difference to those people on the ground in those schools if they've got a better rota system, for example, or if they now feel more assured that they can stay at home because they've got a vulnerable person at home, where before they were being told that they should be on the rota, even though they knew that was putting people at risk. So that's pretty much how we've done it. Sorry for speaking so quickly. 2 minutes.
Brilliant. Thanks, Ros. And a really in there. Chris Denson, can I come to you next from Coventry?
Yeah, I think a lot of ours has been quite similar to the story that Ros has had. We as a union group approached the local authority right from the start of this, and I have to say that my joint secretary Nikki Downs led a lot of that, because for the first 3 weeks of this crisis I was self-isolating and quite ill. So she led a lot of those early negotiations with the authority, and I think part of our success with the recent pay campaign has meant they've known we were so well organised, so that we had to then be part of those decisions. So there's been a constant sort of three-way dialogue between us and the authority, and then between us and our reps and members through things like the WhatsApp groups that have been mentioned already. And we've shifted the local authority on quite a few issues already. So a few of the things that we've actually moved them on, we got an agreement right from the very start that the local authority would be coordinating the strategy and the planning, not just for the maintained schools, but for all the academies and all the free schools as well. So all the advice that they were putting together was going out to all of those schools. We've managed to get the authority to halt every HR procedure. So all capabilities, all restructures, all disciplinaries, all of those have stopped across the city. We got agreement straight away that anyone with underlying conditions or family with underlying conditions could stay at home. Clear statements on home working for children, what that might look like, Easter working voluntary, rota working voluntary, and some of the things that we've pushed and the authority are looking at the moment is because obviously there's a massive drought of PPE in all sorts of sectors, but even in our sector, we've pushed that they approach people like the universities and other companies that have closed in the city to see what stuff they can get from them. And we've also worked collectively with the other unions to put together advice, not just for our unions, but GMB, Unison and so on, so that we're coming with a collective voice. One of the things that we know we're going to have to work on with the authority from next week is what exactly should home working look like? Because we've picked up from our surveys that we've done with all of our members that there seems to be a big disparity on what different schools are expecting. And also now there is some guidance from Ofqual on the exams. Obviously, that's going to shape what guidance we put out to schools who are looking at their year 11 and year 13 classes, because whilst it's positive that those exams are gone, there are also significant issues in terms of rank ordering and things like that that as a union I think we need to look at. The other side of our approach has been the organising strategy and building with our reps, and as has been said, those WhatsApp groups have been absolutely fantastic, and we've been organising through that throughout this whole campaign and making sure that there is a lot more dialogue between our members and reps and head teachers, and that has been significantly increased through this process. We know that we've recruited lots of members. We know that we've recruited, I think we've got 6 new reps only in the last few days, and we've overturned lots of decisions that are going on in schools, making sure everything's voluntary, making sure what is done at home can be made much more simple, because there were some very high demands on members at the start, and sharing good practice, and the reps have worked incredibly well together. One of the things we're also looking at is whether we can start to set up WhatsApp groups for each school, so that the rep has a WhatsApp group set up for their members so that they can discuss. And I just wanted to mention a couple of things that have gone on in our schools. One is one of the schools we're trying to push that the performance management process still continued, and trying to have their senior managers doing interim reviews with their members. Our WhatsApp groups discussed that for half an hour, and within half an hour, our rep had approached the head with a discussion from the members and got that overturned. So performance management has basically stopped in our schools. And 2 of our schools also, their staff have been deciding what they do, and what a number of their staff have decided to do is to go in to the DT departments, and they're actually making PPE equipment that can be sent to care homes. And if you just imagine that on a bigger scale, if we had a government who cared as much about the health of our people as it did about profits, we could be requisitioning all sorts of places to be doing that. So there are massive things that we need to do. But in terms of those two strands, I think the work that we've done over the past couple of years has really, really benefited those members in those schools, because that organising that Phil has spelled out a plan for is incredibly important.
Thank you, Chris, very much. And last but not least, Paul, can I come to you? Paul Shellard is from Brighton and Hove. Thanks, Paul.
Thank you. Firstly, endorse everything that's been said about the importance of WhatsApp group as the sort of central organising feature, really. Bit of context, in Brighton and Hove, we've got 70 schools, only 5 of which are academies or free schools. We've got relatively high membership and quite high rep density, and all those factors have been important in terms of making sure we had a strong influence with the local authority and with schools. Whilst we haven't found we've got lots more reps, I have found there's a trend for what you might call reps who haven't been that involved, but and in attending meetings, etc., but have become involved in WhatsApp groups and are playing a more prominent role. Right from the beginning, we've had regular meetings with the local authority and other unions, firstly physical and then virtual. And that's given us the opportunity to raise issues, and we've had regular updates on data. So, for instance, we know that locally only 1.6% of the student body is are attending schools at the moment. Schools and heads have had a regular sort of daily update from the local authority, and I think all of those factors have meant that it's more difficult for individual schools to go kind of off the beaten track and to do their own thing. That doesn't mean there hasn't been problems with some head teachers who were resistant to us asking for involvement and for consultation. But in general, the things that we've been able to push with the local authority, we think that every school that's open in some form has a rota. And where there isn't, there's kind of particular arrangements between schools. We've resisted pressure to provide more places at the moment in special schools, with the resultant pressure on more staff to become available for rotas. There's been clarification about Easter working being based on volunteering, and we've raised also a number of health and safety issues to do with use of minibuses, provision of hand sanitizer, paediatric first aiders. And I think finally, considering the biggest group, a lot of inquiries that we've had has been from our supply members, the local authority has sent out fairly straightforward and clear advice to schools that where supply teachers are directly engaged, whether that's on a contract or whether there's a kind of a regular pattern of work, that schools will be expected to look back at the previous 12 weeks of work and to continue paying supply staff who are directly engaged on that basis. We've also used that to write then to head teachers to say, if that's the principle that's been set down, they should be using that principle for any staff who they've engaged through agencies, and to make sure they're continuing to pay them based on patterns of work that have existed. So in general, we found most schools, they've been well organised and there've been good relationships, but that consultation process with the local authority has enabled things to be, I suppose, much more organised. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Paul. We don't have any specific questions for you three guys, so Mike, if you can mute those three, but thank you very much for that update. Last person I've got to contribute today is Debbie Brown, and she is from Swindon, and she's going to have a conversation on negotiating with maths during the COVID-19. Debbie.
Thanks, Amanda. Hi, everyone. I'm Debbie, Swindon's District Branch Secretary. Just a little bit of background. Swindon's made up of over 1,300 members. We're a small North Wiltshire town, and our schools in our district are an approximate equal mix of local authority and MATs. Obviously, for everyone, the coronavirus situation is changing daily. It's having a huge impact on every key worker, but it seems that our members are in that group that have been forgotten when the government are given their daily updates. Thankfully, the NEU haven't forgotten our members, and they've been a huge support to us as officers, especially in our area. One of the key roles for me as secretary was to find the best way to help our members in all of our different mats in our town, negotiating with those where we didn't already have an existing JCNC. I needed to find a way to establish constructive engagement. I'm sure everyone's had the same issue. The government's guidance has been full of words, but absolutely no substance. I realised very early on that the mats were as confused, if not more confused, than everyone else, which I turned to my own full advantage. For me, the most effective tool, as mentioned before, has been that joint advice document from ASCL, NAHT and the NEU. It was an absolute dream when that hit my inbox. As soon as the document was released, I emailed it out to all of the CEOs and HR directors. That was at 6:30 in the morning, so it was in their email inbox at the start of the day. Interestingly, that was by far the most popular email I have ever sent out to CEOs and HR teams in our mats. Several had read it and proceeded to send it straight out to their schools as guidance for the SLTs. Suddenly, the NEU were dictating how things were going to happen. I also, at the same time, sent the document out to members so that they were fully informed. And if any employers were starting to make unreasonable demands, they were able to refer to the document and actually talk with confidence. Interestingly, like Phil, the open rate for every single one of the emails that I've sent out that's headed coronavirus update, the open rate has been amazing. If any of our local mats have even dared to suggest continuing with monitoring and support plans, moving to capabilities, I simply quoted Kevin and Mary that we, as a union, will be going after them. I made it very clear how our members should be treated, and really enforce that they're putting themselves in danger every time they cross the threshold and should get gratitude and respect. Locally, I definitely had a voice through the crisis. I did, however, at the end of last week, have one HR director who was acting on instructions from his CEO to get in contact with me to sound out how we could liaise in order to sort out the issue of a, quote, failing NQT. I immediately questioned how they intended to monitor and support the NQT, how they intended to measure her progress when the rule book appears to have been thrown out the window. I told them that video conferencing would not be an appropriate way to hold meetings. How could I offer the appropriate support before and during the process? And then, to finish it off, I explained that I fully intended to name and shame them as a heartless employer, and mentioned that Sky News had forced 2 national companies to backtrack with unreasonable behaviour towards their staff because of negative news stories, and asked them politely if they were willing to risk having Sky News doorstep them as a human interest story. It was definitely a case of who would blink first, and they immediately backed down. Our local mats have been in regular contact with me. Even yesterday, I received an email from one who are trying to do the best for long-term supply teachers. Thank goodness again for the frequently asked questions section on our website. And I just want to take a moment to thank everyone who's responsible for maintaining the website. It's been a fantastic resource, and it has definitely been my saviour several times a day over the past few weeks. I've been able to negotiate with our mats in definitely a new and very much improved way. They have needed us. Suddenly, the local NEU officers have been their go-to for guidance and clarification. They no longer seem to be quoting the Burgundy Book at me in a way that they can play to their advantage. They are asking me for help. For me personally, I fully intend to build on this new version of a working relationship once we come out the other side of what can only be described as a unique and challenging time. Finally, for me, and hopefully for everybody else, I found that the NEU's got a seat at the table. The NEU's got a stronger and much louder voice, and the Mats have needed us, and I fully intend to remind them of that going forward. I hope that's been useful.
Debbie, that's been absolutely brilliant. Thank you so much for that, and so many things that we can and take from that as we go forward. So thank you very much. One question just for the people in this section before we move on to questions with Kevin and Mary, and that is for Ros. So would you unlock his mic, please? It's a question, Ros, from Sue Kent. Hampshire, our local authority, she's in Hampshire, our local authority will not accept the government's definition of vulnerable and insist on including all pupils in a PRU. How did you approach that definition with your local authority? Is she on there? Are you there? Right, we'll come back to that. We'll come back to you at the end and we'll go from there. Okay, I've got now a lot of for Kevin and Mary, which I'm going to begin to read out as we go. So, first question is from Jean Quinn. She's a school rep. I don't know where you're from, Jean, but it says Jean Quinn. How can I best support our members as the press officer and as a school rep? So she wants some press officer advice on that. The second question is Ali McNamara in Reading. Over the coming weeks, schools are planning strategies for distance teaching, potentially over a number of months. Some of the means to do this potentially give a window into the homes of staff and children with inevitable safeguarding implications. And members have asked me what is okay for them to do to help us with conversations with schools, local authorities and other employers. What is the union's position on this? And I'll give you a third one. This is from Louise Cafaro. Don't know where she's from, but it's from Louise. This question is, I want to know if we have a name and shame strategy for those schools and academies that are not keeping long-term supplies in employment. So shall I go to Kevin first or Mary? Which one?
Kevin for the first one, me for second, and Kevin for third.
Okay, Kevin, number one, please.
So about the role of a school rep and a press officer. I mean, we've got the school rep call coming up. I think we've got about 500 workplace reps, school and college reps on that. So we're going to be talking about that in some depth. But from all the contributions we've had, you can see the role of the rep. The role of the press officer locally. I mean, we've had amazing media attention in the last 3 weeks. So finding a way to repeat our national press releases and just giving them to the local paper, sometimes with a local name on it, can get attention. So I think the thing to think about is that we are aiming for a really high moral position on this. We're moral when we say that vulnerable people shouldn't be at work and the family of vulnerable people shouldn't be at work. We're trying to save their lives. We're trying to stop them being in ICU. And we're moral when we're saying we want people to volunteer to be in work to look after the key workers. And that high status then gives us leverage in all sorts of other places. So I think a press officer can be part of getting that high moral stance out for us.
Thank you, Kevin. Mary, on this second question.
So we have really worked hard to get a very clear stance on what is normal and appropriate and acceptable and doable in terms of distance learning. So the NEU's position is, and I wrote a blog about this last week for the TES, we can't homeschool the nation's children. We can't pretend they are in school at home. And there are very good reasons for this. 30% of children and young people have no access to the internet. We know that parental engagement with learning for some will be really high, but others will not be. We know that many teachers, young women with young children, cannot work 5 hours a day because they're looking after their own children while they're at home, while the places where they would normally take their children to be minded while they were working are closed. So they can't be working 5 hours a day, and nor do we think it's appropriate to think that pupils will be working 5 hours a day in the current scenario either. So we've got good advice about this on our website. But the other thing we're doing is we're really making inroads at the DFE about this. We're being consulted about distance learning. We're being consulted about, what's appropriate. And we're making it very clear that schools exist for a reason. The reason there are schools, the reason there are buildings, there are reasons why there are teachers and support staff and leaders in schools and groups of pupils, is because that's where collective learning and teaching takes place. And you can't replicate that in every home. We've got really clear guidance that if teachers are being asked to use distance learning platforms, they should be run by the school, that teachers should not be Zooming their own lessons, they should not be Skyping their own lessons from their own house, that they should be doing that through regulated channels which should be operated by the school. And we're really clear, we've got on our website advice about teaching and learning in these new conditions. So we're clear that you cannot expect teachers to be doing distance learning on their normal timetable. There's a reason why distance learning courses take forever to write. There's a reason why they're so expensive, and that's because when you're doing distance learning, everything that the teacher would normally do about explaining, about presenting, about looking around the classroom, about seeing who's understanding, about deciding which questions to ask, about deciding how to approach the tasks, all which are done in real time and using the teacher's intuition and professional knowledge. If you're doing that in a distance learning, you have to write it all down. So one lesson done through a distance learning takes hours. So the idea that teachers can distance learn at a normal timetable is just ridiculous. So we have really good guidance about this on our website. We have really good guidance about distance learning, about the use of IT and about the use of learning platforms, really good advice about safeguarding, and really good advice also about what is appropriate under teaching and learning. And it is not providing a normal timetable for every child every day, because that simply won't happen. And the final thing I want to say is the Ofqual guidance about exams came out today, and we're doing work on that to translate that clearly into questions and answers for members. But we insist, Ofqual haven't gone quite as far as we wanted about this, but we think you can read into their guidance that the grades, the teacher assessed grades for the exam classes at GCSE and A-level have to be based on work that has already been done. Because if you're to base it on the new work that people might have after this, we know that there's hugely differential access to the internet, hugely differential parental support, and that would just exacerbate and increase the inequalities we already have around access to teaching and learning. So we've worked really hard on this. We'll continue to work really hard, and we'll continue to get really good guidance out for members, particularly around qualifications and marking.
Thanks, Mary. And Kevin, name and shame, your question.
Yeah, but can I just first of all pay tribute to the way Mary's led the work on all of those education questions, including really taking down somebody called Leora Crodas. Don't say this on social media, but in conversations with the Secretary of State, where she's advocating the opposite line to us. And Mary's just been absolutely fantastic on that. And when we get that advice out, it's really important to get that into these reps WhatsApp groups, because we know that our advice is being taken up in all sorts of schools. And that's on the naming and shaming question as well. It's really important to have some schools that are doing the right thing before you start the naming and shaming strategy. We have to know that our writ is running. And what's exciting me about at the moment is I see members who are saying things like, we wrote to the head and said the NEU's guidance is, and they're not saying what's the government's guidance or what's the law say. People are saying what's the union's guidance. They're taking the union's guidance to management and saying they want our position, and that's a start of some power. And I think that's so. Louise's question. Louise is from Newham. A name and shame strategy over heads that aren't doing the right thing about long-term supply. I think that is available as a strategy. I don't think we shouldn't go straight to it. We should get Paul's policy from Brighton, where Brighton is, and we should ask the local authority to do that. We should make sure that the ASCL NEU NAHT guidance is in the inbox of every head teacher, as Debbie Brown did, because that advice says maintain the long-term supply. We should find from the WhatsApp group schools that are maintaining the long-term supply, and then we should go to the members in the schools that aren't doing it. I think what we don't want to do is leapfrog that and the union branch name and shame the head teacher if the members in the school are then going to react negatively to us naming and shaming their school management. So I think you start by, that's an important step, that we have to make sure our members in the school agree with us approaching their management, and they approach their management saying, we want you to maintain those long-term supply teachers. If we've done that and the management are still not doing it, I think we should name and shame them, yeah. And I think that we should threaten to name and shame them like Debbie was doing, and probably they'll back down at that point.
Thank you, Kevin. Okay, I've got a few more, quite a few more questions, so we'll get through as many as we can in the next few minutes. So question 4 was from Melanie Griffiths in Kirklees. What are we advising supply workers employed directly by schools or local authority supply pools who are neither just day-to-day, i.e. not in a long-term engagement, or covering long-term sick funded by insurance, with schools saying that they will no longer pay because the insurance won't cough up? Question 5 is from Bob Groom in Norfolk. He says, are we nationally pressing the DFE and ESFA to encourage LAs and trusts to pause consultations around restructures? He's had some success, but he didn't contact the ESFA directly, but his local authorities are tough nut to crack. And question 6 is from Avi from Warwickshire. How can we keep moving forward with the push for getting supply staff the help they need to get paid? So 2 supply ones there in a row, really. Kevin, shall I come to you first?
Yeah, on those supply questions, I have partly addressed those already.
Yeah.
I think what Paul said from Brighton was that even day to day, they're saying look back over 12 weeks and give those teachers or agency TAs the average of that. I think that is our starting point. If we can't win that, then we're going to have to use the furlough scheme, but that does 80%. So we would much prefer the direct day-to-day involvement. I did hear Tony Butterfield's probably on the call. I saw something that he was writing about a school in Islington that had let go of its supply teachers and was then asking the rest of our members to do the work that those supply teachers were on the rota to do. And our members there have given their head teacher short shrift over that. So there's that sort of approach as well. We are going to keep coming back to the supply question. The furlough scheme is very much a fallback. We want schools to employ people. We think we might be able to get some guidance from government that there is going to be some stuff coming about schools being able to apply to if they've got extra costs from COVID, that they can apply for the money back. So we'll look to see if we can mangle that advice into helping Melanie's, where the insurance isn't paying, that the school still continues to employ the day-to-day. Can they claim back from this COVID fund? We shouldn't rely on that, but we'll look to see if that advice permits us to say that. And
Can I do the bit about the restructuring?
Yeah.
Yes,
Bob.
please.
Hi, Bob. Yeah. Very quickly, use the joint guidance. It's very clear in the joint guidance with the NHE and ASCL that restructuring is not appropriate under these conditions. You can't have meaningful consultation. The NEU, we stopped any consultations with the unions apart from consultation around what's happening at the moment, because you can't garner views. It is ridiculous to suggest that you can. So use the joint guidance.
Okay, thank you very much. I've got 3 more questions, but I'm going to just say one of them is just a statement. I think I can answer yes to that, and the other 2 are around the exams. So one of the questions is from Venda, and she has asked, could we get a list of local authorities who are actively engaging with the union through responses to COVID, and so that we can share those on a positive note to say this is how we're working? I think we absolutely can do that. We just need to find a way to do that. So I'm going to answer that question as a yes, then we'll find a way. And then the 2 questions I've got on exams. One is from Kirsty Patton in Greenwich. In light of Ofqual's announcement today of their formula for determining grades, how do you think we can protect members in exam classes from the inevitable pressure from that they will enable 31st of May, as schools expect evidence to be generated by teachers and their students to the supporting grade process. We also have concerns around the way that previous school data, Performance 8 and Progress 8, and Key Stage 2 and other predictive data software such as ALPS based on unsound premises will punish working class schools and working class pupils. And the other question on the exams is, can we please have some proper consultation from members before reacting too quickly or definitively with regard to ranking students for GCSE and A-level? I think you will find a range of opinions. As a maths and statistics teacher and examiner, I'm broadly in favour, although clearly there are some issues, and that's from Jonathan Jacobs in Enfield.
So should I take those to begin with?
Yes, please.
Okay, so protecting members, I think we need to think of ways to protect members in two ways. The first will be protecting members from parents who will be pressuring them to say what grade you're giving. And actually there, the NHT has come out with today very strongly with, you know, don't be giving out grades and don't be giving out information, but obviously we're going to have to develop guidance for that. And we're also going to have to make it very clear about the workload, unless we want an exponential increasing workload, which is a mathematical term that has been used, has been appropriated by English teachers. Unless we, you know, if we're not careful, we're going to see unsustainable rises in workload for teachers of GCSE and A-level classes. And that is where our interpretation of the Ofqual guidance, that it is only work that has been done to date, which should be used. And we have a moral and ethical stance here, which is that any work which is done simply from home is more inequitable and more unjust, is really key. In terms of involving the members, we really have done that already. Amanda's really involved, and other members have been really involved in how do we respond to assessment. I think we have to be realistic, however. We know that exams are really unfair for working class kids. It's not just that teacher assessment can downgrade black kids and working class kids. We know that exams can do so too. Ofqual is the regulator. We're in negotiations and consultation with Ofqual. We're not going to get everything we want, and the system that comes out is not everything that we want. But I tell you this, it is much, much better than it would have been if we hadn't got involved, if we hadn't negotiated. And we will continue to do that for our members and really stand up for interpreting the Ofqual guidance in the way that we think it should be interpreted.
Yeah, and before I bring Kevin in, if you look at the government guidance that came out today, it very specifically has a it's written, which is one of the things we pushed for in what I call layperson speak, which is very unusual for government documents. And there's a paragraph in there that says schools are not to tell pupils or parents what their gradings are to be, because that is what we did push for because of that pressure. Kevin, did you want to add anything to that?
No, I mean, yes, what we've got is the best of a bad situation. The alternatives of kids doing exams at home that you're setting for them or giving them work and receiving it back in would have been a huge workload, and it would have been really discriminatory, and it would have discriminated hard against working class kids. Kirsty's point, there are going to be no accountability measures this year, so working class schools won't suffer from this in that way. But the whole thing shows that the exam system at 16 is just a rank ordering of kids. This year, teachers will do it explicitly, but that's what the system is, and it's stupid. We shouldn't be doing that at all, but that's not something we can reach at this moment. But I think we can take the opportunity to point out that, you know, a third of kids are told they failed English in the GCSEs because their grade isn't above a grade C, or what they are for now. And that's a crazy thing to say to kids who are speaking fluently in English. To say they've failed in English or to say they've failed in maths is a crazy thing to be saying. It's what our exam system currently does. So we've made the best of the bad deal that the government has created for it.
Absolutely. Okay, and one of the other things that we had an executive meeting yesterday, and one of the other things that we talked about there was, at the moment we've been firefighting, and GCSEs and exams and curriculum are coming into this to develop a longer term strategy to actually not go back to 100% exams, to not have SATs, to not have league tables, and to question the value of Ofsted. So we do have a longer term strategy that we will be developing over Easter and out and negotiating with you, because actually What we need to be pushing, what we need every single one of you to be pushing, is that teacher professional judgment is absolutely sound reason for giving kids a grade. We know our kids in our schools, and we have to be pushing that on every bit of media. So when you see it on social media, it started today with parents questioning, you just repeat, we know your kids, we know where they are, and that's the kind of thing we have to be doing from there. I'm really sorry that we haven't had time to take any further questions. I wanted you to do two things. If you found this helpful, or if you think we could make something a little different, but if you found this helpful, could you write in the comments section for me, please, just to note from there. While we've been on this call, our amazing IT team have already sent out this week's NEU news update. On there are issues, comments around hubs, around vulnerable kids. There's also some information on the union's hardship fund and accessing NQT packs. So please have a look at that. You know, we have to come out of this at some point, and we need to be prepared. We're getting all these new people, and we need to make sure that we're doing that. Just want to reassure you that as part of the strategy and a part of these organising calls, we are looking at how we continue to recruit reps, and how we continue to recruit NQTs and those training, and we are looking at advice for them as well. Thank you so much for your time. We hope to do another one of these soon. It's been brilliant, and if you've got some reps, urge them to come onto the call this afternoon, which is between 4 and 5. Thank you very much for your time.